The emergency sirens wailed through the sterile halls of the Darnex Medical Vessel, a tremendous ship the size of a small Earth city, floating just beyond the orbit of Saturn. Lights blinked red along the corridors as medtechs swarmed toward the quarantine wing. Somewhere among them, Harrison Kepler jogged awkwardly, clutching a satchel that slapped against his side with each step. "Kepler," barked a voice behind him. Harrison turned his head and spotted Dr. Vellet, a towering, eel-skinned alien with a long, severe face and a lab coat that nearly brushed the floors. "You're not authorized," Vellet said, blocking his path with an outstretched limb that looked more tentacle than arm. "I'm a medical consultant." Harrison gasped, adjusting the strap of his satchel. "You called me when your own doctors failed to stabilize the patient." "We called for an Earth pathogen specialist," Vellet corrected him, voice cold. "Not a nurse." "I'm a doctor," Harrison snapped, squaring his shoulders. "And unless you want your patient to die, you better let me through." A tense heartbeat passed. Vellet's translucent eyelids blinked sideways. He stepped aside without another word. Harrison pushed through the heavy doors into the quarantine wing. The smell hit him first, a sterile, metallic tang undercut by something fouler, something sickly sweet. Rows of incubation pods lined the chamber, but only one was active. Inside floated a creature about the size of a horse, its skin blotched purple and green, gasping through a respirator. Monitors around the pod blinked frantic red symbols Harrison couldn't read. Dr. Trevi, another alien, this one squat and covered in glistening blue scales, hovered over the controls, muttering to himself. "What's the status?" Harrison called as he approached. Trevi turned, face drawn tight. "Terminal." The infection spread to the primary circulatory nodes within 2 rotations. No response to tissue regeneration or nanocyte therapy. "What's the pathogen?" Harrison said, pulling on a pair of gloves. "Unknown. It resists categorization. No matches in our database." Harrison peered into the pod. The creature twitched violently, its limbs spasming against the restraints. "I need a sample," Harrison said. Trevi hesitated. "For what purpose?" "To run an old-fashioned culture test," Harrison said. "You know, the thing humans did back before we had fancy nanotech." Trevi's glance toward Vellet was almost comical in its disbelief, but a small nod from the superior sent him shuffling off to retrieve a sterile syringe. Minutes later, Harrison sat cross-legged on the floor with a portable field kit spread around him. He worked in silence, streaking the sample onto nutrient agar plates, setting up a makeshift incubator using a heating coil and a metal tray. Vellet loomed over him. "You realize," he said, "that if the infection is as fast-acting as we believe, your methods will be too slow." "Then you'd better hope I'm wrong," Harrison muttered. He waited, watching the plates like a hawk. After about an hour, tiny colonies started to form, pale and fuzzy under the magnifier. "There you are," Harrison whispered. Vellet leaned in, squinting. "What is it?" Harrison grinned grimly. "A fungus. Looks a lot like Candida glabrata. A nasty one, but not invincible." Trevi scoffed. "Your Earth fungi are irrelevant to Zarnek's physiology." "Tell that to the pathogen," Harrison said, pointing at the growing colonies. "It's thriving in your patient's fluids." Vellet shifted, uncertain. "Assuming you are correct, what treatment do you propose?" Harrison rummaged through his satchel. "Fluconazole," he said, pulling out a small glass vial. "Antifungal. Cheap, common, available in every pharmacy back home." Trevi recoiled. "You cannot be serious. Do you have a better idea?" Harrison said sharply. "Because from where I'm standing, your patient's got maybe 6 hours left." The 2 aliens exchanged a series of rapid, subvocal clicks, their version of whispering Harrison had learned before Vellet's side. "Administer it," he said. Harrison prepared the injection carefully, diluting the antifungal to match the patient's body mass and circulatory parameters as best he could estimate. He loaded the syringe into the pod's medport, punched in the dose, and held his breath. The fluid disappeared into the tubing. The creature inside the pod jerked once, then went still. For a terrifying moment, Harrison thought he might have killed it. But then the monitors began to change, not flashing faster, but slower, more steadily. Trevi stared at the readouts in disbelief. Vital signs stabilizing. Vellet's mouth opened and closed, struggling for words. Harrison sat back on his heels, exhausted. "Sometimes," he said, "the simplest answer is the right one." The celebration was short-lived. Less than an hour later, a medtech burst into the room. "Emergency," he cried. Secondary infections detected on Deck 9. Harrison lurched to his feet. Same symptoms. Yes. The medic panted. Blotching circulatory collapse. Vellet's face darkened. It must be airborne. No, Harrison said quickly. Fungal spores. It's how they spread. Especially if your air filtration isn't sterilized properly. Trevi looked horrified. Our systems are not designed for biological containment. Then you better start scrubbing, Harrison said grimly. And I need a stockpile of antifungals. The next 12 hours were chaos. Harrison led a frantic effort to track and treat the new infections. He taught alien medtechs how to prepare antifungal doses, how to recognize early-stage symptoms, how to quarantine effectively. He even had to jury-rig a few airlocks with chemical sprayers made from repurposed coolant systems. At one point, while squeezing through a narrow maintenance shaft to reach a contaminated duct, Harrison slipped and wrenched his ankle badly. He bit down a yelp and tested his weight on it. Pain shot up his leg, but he could still move. Keep going, he muttered to himself, dragging forward. By the time he returned to the quarantine wing, his ankle had swollen to the size of a grapefruit. He limped heavily as he checked the original patient's vitals. The creature was awake now, weak but conscious, its huge eyes following Harrison with something like gratitude. Vellet approached, holding a scanner. "Permit me," he said. Harrison sank onto a bench and let the alien wave the device over his leg. After a moment, Vellet made a low, whistling noise. Fracture in the fibula. Minor ligament damage. Fantastic, Harrison said dryly. You require immobilization and rest. Harrison chuckled without humor. No time for that. You will be of no use if incapacitated, Vellet said sternly. Trevi appeared, carrying a splint fashioned from something that looked suspiciously like a piece of furniture. We do not have human medical supplies, Trevi said. This will suffice. The splint was crude but effective. Harrison gritted his teeth as they wrapped and secured it. Walking was agony, but he forced himself upright. Deck 11 has reported new cases, Trevi said. Then let's move, Harrison said. For the next 2 days, Harrison worked around the clock, his ankle throbbing with every step. He taught classes in makeshift classrooms, barking orders to teams of alien medtechs who struggled to keep up. He revised treatment protocols as new data came in. He even developed a rudimentary testing strip to identify fungal contamination on surfaces. The infection curve finally started to flatten. New cases dwindled. The original patient, who introduced himself weakly as Commander Relk, was strong enough to sit up and eat. Harrison visited him one morning, limping heavily but smiling. How do you feel? Harrison asked. Relk touched his chest with a 3-fingered hand. Grateful, he rasped. You should be, Harrison said. You gave half the ship a heart attack. Relk made a sound that might have been laughter. Vellet arrived, carrying a data pad. Dr. Kepler, he said formally. On behalf of the Darnex Medical Corps and the Zarnex High Command, I am authorized to offer you formal commendation and honorary membership. Harrison blinked. Membership in what? Our medical guild, Vellet said. You have demonstrated extraordinary competence under conditions none of us anticipated. Trevi stepped forward, holding a small silver pin shaped like a stylized double helix. It is a mark of great honor, Trevi said. Harrison hesitated, then accepted the pin. Thanks, he said quietly. But next time, maybe call me before it gets this bad. Vellet's face was unreadable. There will not be a next time. Our systems are already being upgraded based on your recommendations. Harrison grinned. Good, because I don't think my ankle could survive another round. As he hobbled back toward his temporary quarters, cradling the pin in one hand, Harrison felt an odd warmth bloom in his chest. He had come here expecting to be dismissed, patronized, maybe even ignored. Instead, he had found a place where a little stubborn human ingenuity still mattered. A place where he had made a difference. The medical bay lights dimmed to a soft blue as the station shifted into its artificial night cycle. Harrison leaned against the wall outside the quarantine wing, his injured ankle elevated on an overturned equipment crate. The splint itched like crazy, but he didn't dare scratch it. A gauzy silence settled over the corridor, broken only by the occasional clatter of a passing medtech. Trevi shuffled over, carrying a tray stacked with what looked like nutrient bars and a bulb of deep green liquid. You require sustenance, Trevi said, offering the tray. Your metabolic constants are dangerously irregular. Harrison accepted the food without argument. He peeled back the wrapper of a bar, sniffed it suspiciously, and took a cautious bite. It tasted like compressed sawdust mixed with something vaguely floral. Not bad, Harrison lied. Trevi perched on the crate beside him, his scaled hands twitching slightly in a rhythmic pattern that reminded Harrison of someone drumming fingers on a table. You exhibit significant physical degradation, Trevi said. Yet you continue to engage in high-energy tasks. Harrison shrugged and took another bite. That's just standard operating procedure back home. You push through until the job's done. Trevi's frilled ears fluttered. This is considered acceptable? Not really, Harrison admitted, chewing. But it's expected. The alien tilted his head. I fail to comprehend. If it is known to be detrimental, why is it normative? Because, Harrison said around a mouthful, if we waited to be in perfect shape before doing anything important, nothing would ever get done. Trevi absorbed that in silence, his dark eyes luminous in the low light. A soft chime interrupted them. Vellet approached, a portable console balanced in one hand. Preliminary environmental scans complete, he announced. Residual fungal spores detected in hydroponics, sanitation systems, and recreational zones. Harrison wiped his hands on his trousers. That's bad. Real bad. Trevi's scales flushed a faint purple, a sign Harrison had learned meant anxiety. We initiated surface sterilization. That won't be enough, Harrison said. Fungal spores are stubborn. They'll hide in cracks, behind panels, inside air ducts. You need to implement a full atmospheric decontamination. Vellet frowned. The procedure is disruptive. Entire sections must be evacuated. You want a ship-wide outbreak? Harrison said. Because that's how you get one. Vellet hesitated, then began tapping commands into his console. Trevi leaned closer. What method would you recommend? Old school, Harrison said. Release a vaporized antifungal agent into the ventilation system. Make sure it reaches every corner. Then cycle the atmosphere through sterilizing filters. Vellet looked skeptical. Such crude measures saved your commander's life, Harrison cut in. Vellet said nothing more, but the subtle tightening around his eyes spoke volumes. Hours later, Harrison hobbled into the hydroponics bay, a cavernous space filled with rows of towering alien plants. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of unfamiliar blossoms. Teams of Darnex medtechs in protective suits moved among the foliage, spraying a fine mist from handheld canisters. Harrison caught sight of a small group clustered around a patch of shriveled vines. He limped over, curious. Problem? He asked. A medic with mottled green skin turned to him. These specimens appear to have absorbed the spores systemically. Harrison crouched awkwardly, examining the plants. The leaves were blotched with the same purplish hue he had seen on the infected creatures. They're compromised, Harrison said. Burn them. The medtech recoiled. These are classified as vital food sources. You can't risk it, Harrison said. One gust of air, and you're back to square one. The medic hesitated, then signaled to a colleague. Harrison watched as they set up an incineration unit, the flames washing the infected plants into ash. A sharp, rhythmic clicking echoed through the bay. Harrison turned to see Relk approaching, supported by a slim exoskeletal frame attached to his torso. His skin still bore faint traces of discoloration, but his eyes were clear and alert. You should not be active, Harrison said, straightening carefully. Relk huffed what might have been laughter. Neither should you. They regarded each other for a moment, mutual respect passing between them without need for further words. Relk gestured to the devastated crop. This will cause social unrest. I figured, Harrison said. But better a few angry farmers than a dead ship. Relk made a deep, rumbling sound that Harrison took as agreement. By the end of the cycle, over a third of hydroponics had been purged. The sanitation systems had been flushed with antifungal vapor, and recreational areas were sealed off for deep cleansing. Harrison stumbled back to the medical wing, his ankle throbbing and his head pounding. In the infirmary, Trevi was setting up a new workstation. He turned as Harrison entered. Your neural patterns show signs of acute exhaustion, Trevi said. You must rest. No argument here, Harrison said, collapsing onto a cot. Trevi approached, holding a small device that resembled a handheld massager. This will accelerate osteorepair, he said. Permit application? Be my guest, Harrison mumbled. Trevi pressed the device against Harrison's splinted leg. A gentle vibration pulsed through the limb, soothing the worst of the ache. You have altered several of our protocols, Trevi said after a moment. There is debate among the senior consultants. Harrison cracked one eye open. Debate about what? Whether your methods represent innovation or recklessness. Why not both? Harrison said, grinning faintly. Trevi seemed to consider that. Your approach is unorthodox, yet results are undeniable. Humans are good at improvising, Harrison said. We've had to be. Trevi set the device aside. Your species must possess remarkable resilience to survive such chaotic methodologies. You have no idea, Harrison muttered, already drifting toward sleep. He awoke several hours later to the sensation of something warm pressed against his forehead. Blinking blearily, he found Relk standing over him, holding a small data chip. For you, Relk said. Harrison took the chip, squinting at the alien script scrolling across its surface. What's this? Access codes, Relk said. In case you require unrestricted entry to containment zones. Harrison sat up slowly. You sure about that? Relk's gaze was steady. You have earned trust. Wordlessly, Harrison slipped the chip into his pocket. A soft chime sounded overhead, and Vellet's voice echoed through the bay. Attention, atmospheric decontamination commencing in 30 segments. All personnel must report to sealed zones. Trevi bustled over, carrying a bundle of respirator masks. You must don protective gear, he said, thrusting one at Harrison. He pulled it over his head, adjusting the straps with practiced ease. The mask smelled faintly of ozone. As the countdown ticked away, Harrison limped toward the designated safe zone, flanked by Trevi and a few wary medtechs. The corridors buzzed with tension, the ship itself seeming to hold its breath. When the decontamination started, a low hum vibrated through the walls. Harrison watched through a viewport as a thin mist filled the outer corridors, curling like ghostly fingers around every surface. Hours passed in confinement. Trevi busied himself analyzing sensor data, muttering to himself in a language Harrison couldn't decipher. Relk dozed fitfully in a corner, his exoskeleton humming softly. Harrison stared at the ceiling, mind drifting. He thought of home. Not just Earth, but the little things: greasy diner breakfasts, the screech of subway brakes, the way New York smelled after rain. Things he hadn't realized he missed until now. The all-clear sounded in the 9th hour. The safe zone doors hissed open, and Harrison stepped into the newly scrubbed corridors. The air smelled different, cleaner, sharper. Vellet approached, his usually impassive face showing a rare flicker of emotion. Initial scans indicate a 97% reduction in spore presence, he said. Good, Harrison said, tugging off his mask. Now you just need to keep it that way. Vellet's gaze lingered on him. You are anomalous. I get that a lot, Harrison said. Trevi joined them, holding a glowing data pad. Replicators have synthesized a stable antifungal compound based on your samples, he said. Distribution to critical systems underway. Harrison felt a weight lift from his chest. Then we might just make it. Relk clanked over, his exoskeleton gleaming under the bright lights. You have altered this vessel's fate, he said simply. Harrison rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly self-conscious. Just doing my job. No, Vellet said. You have demonstrated that adaptability can surpass technology. That intuition can rival calculation. Trevi nodded. You have forced us to reconsider many assumptions. Harrison chuckled. Glad I could shake things up. As he limped away toward his quarters, the halls buzzing with renewed purpose behind him, Harrison allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Maybe humans were chaotic, stubborn, and reckless. But sometimes, just sometimes, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Harrison shuffled into the diagnostic suite, the temporary brace on his ankle stiff but tolerable now. He dropped heavily into a chair and stretched his leg out in front of him. The room buzzed with low conversation as Darnex medtechs recalibrated equipment, scrubbing the systems clean of any lingering fungal data. Trevi entered behind him, carrying a thin tablet etched with fresh schematics. You are required for a final verification, Trevi said, offering the tablet without ceremony. Harrison took it and skimmed the data. You're implementing the antifungal vapor system station-wide? Trevi nodded. Manually triggered in high-risk sectors. Auto-dose through environmental monitors elsewhere. Good, Harrison said. You're picking it up quicker than I expected. Guess you guys are fast learners when your backs are against the wall. Trevi did not bristle at the comment. Instead, his frilled ears twitched thoughtfully. We prefer not to encounter such adversities. Our design philosophy emphasizes prevention over improvisation. Harrison leaned back, balancing the tablet on his knee. Yeah, well, humans usually don't get the luxury of avoiding disasters. We just clean up after them. Trevi blinked slowly, as if cataloging them for future reference. It is an inefficient model. It is, Harrison agreed. but it keeps us sharp. The doors to the suite parted with a soft hiss, and Velvet entered, his lab coat replaced by a formal dark robe that shimmered slightly under the lights. He carried a small, black case in one hand. Trevi straightened immediately. Harrison just watched, curiosity piqued. "Dr. Kepler," Velvet said, "it is customary, after a successful crisis mitigation, to offer an acknowledgement of gratitude." "Another pin?" Harrison guessed, glancing at the one already clipped to his jacket. Velvet opened the case to reveal a slim, silver bracelet inlaid with faintly pulsing emerald lines. "This is a mark of endurance," Velvet said. "Rarely bestowed. It signifies survival through catastrophic biological events." Harrison whistled low. "You guys do love your jewelry." "It is not ornamental," Velvet said. "The bracelet contains your biometric data, encoded with your contributions to this vessel's survival. Should you encounter any Darnex fleet, you will be recognized immediately." Harrison hesitated only a moment before sliding the bracelet onto his wrist. It adjusted to his size automatically, settling with a gentle click. "Appreciate it," Harrison said. "But I gotta ask, what's the real reason for the fanfare? You're not exactly the sentimental types." Trevi answered before Velvet could. "Your methods exposed vulnerabilities in our protocols that we were blind to. It is uncomfortable, yet necessary." "You're welcome," Harrison said, a little more gently. Velvet gestured toward the updated schematics. "There remains one final test. We must validate the vapor dispersal system under controlled conditions." Harrison stood, bracing himself on the chair. "All right. Where?" "Hydroponics Bay 2, Velvet said. "Minimal occupancy. Contained environment." Trevi handed Harrison a fresh respirator. "Standard precautions apply." They moved as a group through the gleaming halls. The atmosphere on the ship had shifted since the outbreak. Personnel moved with more purpose, but the usual stiff formality had softened. A few aliens even nodded respectfully as Harrison passed. He acknowledged them with a brief tilt of his head. When they reached Hydroponics Bay 2, Harrison paused before entering. He pulled the respirator over his face, checking the seals as Trevi initiated the door cycle. Inside, the bay was a mirror of the first, except here the plants were healthy, their broad leaves whispering in the recycled breeze. Monitors on the walls displayed air purity levels and spore counts, all currently green. Trevi activated the dispersal system. Thin white mist issued from vents set high along the walls, curling downward in lazy spirals. Harrison watched the readings carefully. "Particle density looks good. Diffusion's even. We will monitor for fungal spore die-off rates over the next 4 rotations," Trevi said. Harrison jabbed a thumb at the nearest monitor. "You'll know within one if you scan properly. Fungi don't tolerate direct exposure for long." Trevi made a note on his tablet. "Efficiency is preferable." They spent the next hour moving through the bay, checking filter inlets and moisture levels. Harrison clambered up a maintenance ladder to inspect one of the primary vent hubs, grimacing as his ankle protested. At the top, he pulled a portable spectrometer from his belt and ran a quick analysis. The results flashed green. "Clear," he called down. Trevi signaled acknowledgement. Harrison tucked the device away and climbed carefully back down. By the time they finished, the mist had dissipated, leaving the air crisp and faintly medicinal. Satisfied, Harrison peeled off the respirator. "Looks like it's working." Trevi adjusted the settings on the wall console. "We will replicate the procedure in other sectors sequentially." "Good plan," Harrison said. "No sense overwhelming the filtration systems." Velvet tapped his console, finalizing the test record. "Your involvement is no longer necessary. You have completed your obligations." "Obligations?" Harrison repeated, chuckling. "I didn't realize I signed a contract." Velvet's expression did not waver. "Your actions have been recorded as voluntary service under emergency statutes." "I'll add it to my resume," Harrison said. They exited the hydroponics bay into the main corridor. The ship's ambient lighting had shifted again, signaling the approach of another rest cycle. Trevi walked beside him, silent for a long moment before speaking. "Will you remain aboard?" Harrison shook his head. "No point. My work here's done." "You could teach," Trevi said. "There is much we have yet to learn of human adaptability." Tempting, Harrison thought, but not for him. "I'm better suited to trouble," Harrison said. "Not classrooms." Trevi inclined his head. "Then may your journeys remain instructive." Velvet halted near a junction. A transport vessel is scheduled to depart within 3 segments. It can return you to your prior coordinates. I'll be ready, Harrison said. As he limped back to his quarters to gather his few belongings, he passed a group of young Darnex medtechs arguing animatedly over a schematic of the new antifungal systems. They fell silent as he approached, watching him with wide, reverent eyes. Harrison gave them a small, two-fingered salute and kept walking. 3 segments later, Harrison stood in the docking bay, his satchel slung over one shoulder. Relk arrived, moving more steadily now without his exoskeleton. You depart swiftly, Relk said. Swiftly's how I roll, Harrison said. Relk extended one hand, palm up. Harrison clasped it without hesitation. You changed more than systems, Relk said. You changed minds. Glad to hear it, Harrison said. Just don't get sick again, all right? I'm not always going to be nearby to bail you out. Relk's mouth curved upward in what was unmistakably a smile. We will endeavor to remain healthy. The transport's boarding lights blinked green. Harrison gave a short wave and stepped onto the ramp. As the hatch closed behind him, he settled into a narrow seat by a viewport. The Darnex vessel shrank away, a silver sliver against the vast black. Harrison leaned his head back and closed his eyes, the bracelet on his wrist pulsing with a slow, steady glow. Whatever awaited him next, he knew one thing for sure. Humans might not be the most advanced species out there, or the most orderly, but in a galaxy that prized perfection, sometimes it was a little chaos, a little stubbornness, and a lot of grit that made all the difference. And Harrison Kepler, for all his flaws, had proven that beyond any doubt.